I recently watched the Chinese film Detective Chinatown 1900, a prequel to the hugely successful Detective Chinatown series. The film itself, while continuing its classic formula of slapstick comedy and buddy cop crime solving, also told the story of the difficulties that Chinese nationals in the USA faced at this time, largely due to the Chinese Exclusion Act, a racist law aimed at preventing immigration of Chinese labourers to the USA and Canada. Before I get any deeper into this video, I should say I really enjoyed this combination. It's very difficult to strike a balance between light-hearted comedy and more heavy, deeper social issues, but this film did a fantastic job of it, so a thumbs up to all of those involved, and if you haven't seen it, I recommend you do so. Seeing the social issues present in the film from a British perspective got me thinking, what was the UK story with Chinese labour? Was there significant usage of Chinese labourers, and if so, how were they treated? I did some more research into the topic and found that, unsurprisingly, the UK also has a dark history of mistreating Chinese labourers. The first major records I could find of Chinese labourers in Europe were during World War I, as at that time all the local men were already involved in the war effort, causing huge labour shortages. In 1916, an agreement was made between the Allies and China to enlist thousands of Chinese labourers and form the Chinese Labour Corps, the CLC. The Allies got the manpower they needed, Chinese farmers were offered solid pay for their work, and China hoped that its involvement in the war would lead to the return of Shandong, which was currently occupied by Germany. It is estimated that nearly 95,000 labourers joined the UK's CLC, which is the highest number the UK recruited from any non-European country. Therefore, in 1917, an estimated 81,000 labourers travelled first by boat to Canada, and then by train across Canada in order to board a boat bound for Europe. You may think that this many men making such a long journey to help the war effort would be newsworthy, and that these men might even be treated as heroes during their journey across Canada, but this couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, the story was kept entirely secret from the Canadian public, in part due to racist tendencies towards Chinese labourers at the time. After media coverage was permitted in 1920, the local newspaper The Halifax Herald reported that they were herded like so many cattle into cars, forbidden to leave the train and guarded like criminals. The journey was long and tough, and not all survived. Today, gravestones of Chinese labourers who never even made it to France can be found in both Canada and the UK. Those that did survive the journey were essential to the war effort in France. Their work included digging trenches, repairing roads and railways, unloading ships, repairing tanks, and more. During this period, they were by no means treated well, not even being allowed outside their camps to socialise with locals, and many fell ill from poor diets. Their mistreatment was serious enough to concern the Chinese government, who in 1917 set up the Bureau of Overseas Chinese Workers in order to support them. After concerns were raised, Britain eventually agreed to grant compensation to Chinese labourers for any blindness, deafness or insanity incurred during work. Yet despite their poor treatment, their work was vital, and it's impossible to imagine how the war may have ended without the efforts of those 90,000 plus workers. However, whilst the war did end in 1918, their work did not. Many labourers were required to stay behind to complete dangerous tasks such as clearing landmines and live artillery, and to recover the bodies of fallen soldiers. Official numbers state the death count of Chinese labourers at around 2,000, but more recent estimates put the total at potentially as high as 20,000, with the majority of cases being due to poor treatment, disease, shells and landmines. Even after their work had come to an end, there are still numerous ways in which the CLC were treated as second-class citizens. When war medals were being given out to those who had helped the war effort, the Chinese Labour Corps only received bronze medals instead of the usual silver which was handed out to locals. And their medals lacked the inscription of a name, instead only having a number, which feels incredibly dehumanising. There was also one case where a labourer named Liu Dianchen was recommended for a military medal after an act of bravery whilst under fire, but it was decided that the CLC were ineligible for military medals, and he was instead only given the Meritorious Service Medal. As if this wasn't enough, the UK forcibly repatriated the entire workforce after their work was done, refusing to give the labourers who had risked their lives for this country the right to stay in the UK should they wish to do so. In contrast, it is estimated that over 10% of the Chinese labourers hired by France actually settled in the country after the war. Oh, and China's hope that their involvement in the war would lead to the return of Shandong? The Allies actually secretly offered Japan the land controlled by Germany in return for defeating the German forces there. This betrayal by the Allies led to China's refusal to sign the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, and in fact was a leading aggravating factor of the May 4th movement in 1919. But that's a story for another time. For nearly 100 years after the war, the Chinese Labour Corps were forgotten by history, and this all started in 1917 when a painting in France, being dubbed as the largest painting in the world, still couldn't find space to give the Chinese Labour Corps the recognition that they deserved. In fact, they were originally to be part of the painting, which was made to commemorate the team effort of all of those who had helped win the war. However, after the US involvement in 1917, the Chinese Labour Corps were painted over in order to find space to fit in the American military. We must not allow the Chinese Labour Corps to be forgotten any longer. And we must not forget that whilst the Chinese Exclusion Act has been repealed for many decades, racism against international Chinese communities still exists in less obvious, more insidious ways. We must respect history and respect the contributions of Chinese people to the world. Thankfully, a campaign titled Ensuring We Remember was launched by the Chinese community in Britain back in 2014 to put right the disgraceful fact that in 40,000 war memorials in the UK, there is not a single one commemorating the Chinese Labour Corps of World War I. In 2017, the Imperial War Museum also launched a project aimed at raising awareness of the Chinese Labour Corps' contributions to World War I, and it is estimated that this project reached over 8,000 people. Whilst this isn't nearly enough, it's a start, and hopefully this video will also help to raise some awareness on the Chinese Labour Corps so that they can finally begin to receive some of the recognition that they have been owed for such a long time. And who knows, maybe one day we'll even see a big production film that sheds light on their story. However, the story doesn't stop there. Through my research, I found that just 25 years later, a whole new hidden chapter of Chinese labour in the UK began during World War II. If you found this video interesting, please do like and follow, as I will continue to share these stories, because somebody has to.